समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The CJP protest rages on. I would say quite rapidly. It has already reached this third stage of a usual protest in India. The first stage is when whatever you're protesting against or whatever the target of your protest is, usually it's the government, can be central government, state government, or a government agency. Usually in the first stage, they don't take you seriously. They think this will fizzle out. This is just a naam ka vaste thing. It's just a few people playing out a hobby. It happens with almost every protest. The second is when the state comes at you in strength. Usually it comes at you in strength, tries to remove you, tries to throw you out, sometimes uses power, uses dandas, lathis, or in case there is a response from the crowds or from the protesters, then the level of state violence goes up. That is the second stage. The third stage then is negotiations, because every protest ultimately leads to negotiation. There is no protest that is settled without a negotiation. There is no protest that achieves all its objectives. The protesters and the governments of the day or the authorities of the day, it could be an agency, it could even be a company in case it's a labor protest. Both sides know that they are living in a democratic environment where give and take is a part of life. So you might have maximalist demands, but you will settle for something. Mahatma Gandhi showed us the way. He always had maximalist demands. He might demand Purn Swaraj, but settle for self-governance and then live to fight another day. That is the essence of a democracy. And that is what's playing out now. This has moved much faster than the earlier such protests, simply because we live in much faster times. This is a protest that's been built on Instagram. It's also moving at that speed. Also, the government's also responding at that speed. I think nobody was quite prepared for what happened on the morning of 20th of this month, that is Monday, the Parliament March. I would go so far as to say that not even the protesters were prepared for the kind of momentum this will acquire. That having happened, both sides have sat back and taken a fresh look at the situation. As we stand today, Sonam Wangchuk, who had become the mascot of this protest, and he has broken his fast at the hands of two important ministers of Modi government. That's an important visual that underlines this protest. I know some people who are backing the protest have sort of cancelled him. They've cancelled him saying, we should never have trusted you. In any case, you've done your job, go back to Ladakh, etc., etc. That's besides the point. The fact is that the leaders of the movement have also decided to negotiate with the government. They asked for a neutral place, so they got to Constitution Club, which is as neutral can be. That's where the meetings took place. They've come out saying that two of their demands have been accepted, but they are negotiating for more. Of course, they say the demand that the minister should go is non-negotiable, he must go. The government is saying the minister will not go, etc., etc. This will go on. Now, once again, I told you that this is stage 3. Now, what happens with public protests in India? What if I told you that almost every public protest in India has gone through the same stages? Every genuinely popular protest movement has ended up achieving a substantive chunk of its demands. Now, none gets all its demands accepted, because ultimately in a democracy there is negotiation and there is give and take. Now, I can take you right back to the early 20th century. In fact, that's when the peaceful protest culture started in India. As we've seen in Delhi, the Sikh community coming out in support of the CJP protesters opening up the Gurdwaras. Important thing is, I know there'll be many arguments and people will take you backwards, but substantively, the first real protest, peaceful protest or pushback to British authority in India came from a man that most people have forgotten now. Some in my generation might remember, particularly if we were brought up in North India. Otherwise, nobody would know. That was a man called Darshan Singh Feruman. Darshan Singh Feruman, born in 1885, say 4 years before Nehru, joined the British Indian Army for about 3 years, then came out and sat in protest for freeing up the treasury of the Golden Temple. And that grew into the movement for freeing up the Gurdwaras from the rule of the Mahants, and that is what led to the enactment of Sikh Gurdwaras Act in 1925 by the British. That was the precursor of what is called as Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, SGPC. It's an elected body. It's probably the only religious elected body, elections for which are conducted by the State Election Commission. That was among the earliest, I'm not saying the only one, but among the earliest cases of somebody using the method of peaceful protest to get a demand met. Then the Gandhi era came. By that time, Darshan Singh Feruman had joined Gandhi. What happened with him, I will come to a bit later. But 1926, he was part of the non-cooperation movement, went to jail for 14 months. After that, he went to jail again 3 times during civil disobedience movement. This was a time when Gandhi played this game with the British. That is, a protest, a fast, maximalist demands, and then making a compromise. Both sides were okay. Both sides knew that this was not an inflexible situation. In fact, Indian freedom movement is a story of peaceful protests, fasts, disobedience, and constant negotiation. That's what gave us this wonderful republic, which started with universal franchise in 1952 with the first election. I just want to underline the fact that America may have become a democracy a couple of centuries earlier almost, but got the voting right for its women in 1920. And Switzerland only gave voting right to its women in 1971. That also took a referendum in the country, but in Switzerland, everything is done through a referendum. That is how India's protest culture has grown. What we are seeing right now is only the latest manifestation of this. Under the Modi government, we've seen a couple. We saw the Shaheen Bagh protests. Those were directed at CAA, NRC, led to communal riots in Delhi. That resulted in the deaths of about 48 people. Only recently, there have been convictions handed out by a Delhi court to a group of people, including an AAP councillor, municipal councillor from Aam Aadmi Party, for the lynching and killing of an IB employee, Intelligence Bureau employee, who happened to be living in that area. Now you might say, what did that achieve, the CA, NRC? The fact is, while the BJP also used it in the elections because the protesters were mostly Muslims, and remember, the Prime Minister made that speech in Jharkhand where he said, who are these protesters? You can figure out from the clothes they are wearing. The fact is that broke the momentum of CAA and NRC, because also in the West Asian countries where India has strong friendships, these friendships have grown much stronger under Modi government. They were the countries that first offered Prime Minister Modi their highest awards, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. Pushback came from there also, and that is when, in the end, in December of that year, Prime Minister went to Ramlila ground, delivered a speech with a very conciliatory message towards the Muslim community. So that protest also had an impact. The farmers' protest, we know very well about the farmers' protest. Okay, all right. They wanted a law for MSP, etc. That didn't happen, but the fact is that the government withdrew those farm laws, which in my view was unfortunate. I thought those farm laws were good, but government also erred in not reaching out to farmers first and convincing them and letting them argue and answer their questions on why the government thought these laws were best. They did not do it. They brought these as a surprise. Farmers got suspicious. Ultimately, the government withdrew these laws. Prime Minister on the day of Guru Purab made a speech withdrawing these laws and also invoked Guru Gobind Singh's famous lines, also part of my school prayer once in Batinda, De Shiva Varmoe He, Shubh Karman Se Kabho Na Taro. So he used that and withdrew these. At the same time, the protesters did not insist on their maximalist demand of a legal guarantee for MSP, and they went home satisfied with this victory. So once again, the evidence always is that every movement, every protest goes through this cycle. The fourth stage always is settlement. The fourth stage always is a settlement as long as the protest remains peaceful. Once again, you get something, you don't get everything. It's a give and take. As a very smart banker once said to me, one of India's smartest bankers said to me, a really good deal is one where both sides leave the table thinking, I could have got a little more. If it's a deal where one side thinks I got everything I wanted, the other side thinks I got nothing, that battle is resumed in the course of time. That does not lead to a lasting settlement. That becomes like the Treaty of Versailles or what we've seen lately, the MOU between Iran and the US. Again, as you go backwards, this generation also, even the Gen Z that's protesting now, they might have been little kids at that point. Little kids means actually kids. I would never call an adult a kid. Between 2010 and 12, there was a series of protests. So they were India Against Corruption protests by Anna Hazare, led Anna Hazare with Arvind Kejriwal and others, supported from behind by the RSS and Vivekanand Foundation, etc., and the BJP by and large, because they saw UPA as getting really weak, and they thought that was a moment for them to either push it out of power or weaken it so much that they will be able to come back to power, having been sitting in the opposition for 10 years. Those were very effective protests. Those protests were also different from any other we have seen so far, because in those protests, all of the TV media, by that time TV media was very strong. Most of the media, but particularly the TV channels, were all fully with the Anna movement. They were so supportive of the Anna movement that some of India's most prominent anchors even went to that stage, India Against Corruption stage, and delivered speeches. It was in the course of that movement that Arvind Kejriwal made a statement that I would call breathtaking. In fact, I wrote a national interest about it. I will try and find it from the archives and share it with you. He said, it is not our intention to bring down this government. Hello. It was like somebody standing on a protest stage, basically saying, I can pull down this government anytime, but I shall not do so. That government had become very weak at that point. Even then, that government survived, went through the process, an election took place on due date, the government lost big time, or as Donald Trump would say, bigly, and BJP came into power with a full majority. That may not have been the intention of Arvind Kejriwal, but that definitely was the intention of the larger forces backing the India Against Corruption movement. So once again, the movement itself, Anna Hazare broke his fast because he was promised some kind of a Jan Lokpal bill. Some kind of a Lokpal bill came in. A Lokpal has also come into being. But if you can find even 24 cases reaching this Lokpal, since this institution, a glorious sinecure for retired judges was created, I'll be very surprised. Nothing's happened as a result. But the fact is, some laws were changed. This law was promised, in the course of which Anna Hazare decided to break his fast. I remember there was a late night discussion on NDTV. I think if you can search, you can find it on NDTV's archives, where some of us were relieved that Anna Hazare had broken his fast, that he will now be safe. He had also decided to go to Medanta Hospital, but some of his supporters were angry, including in that case Meda Patkar. And when it was pointed out to her that, look, the man may have lost his life, and I think she said something like, sacrifices have to be made for a good cause. So once again, Anna Hazare also knew that you cannot stick by maximalist demands. That is the trend in India. Now, can a public protest bring down a government? That question has come up over the last week or 10 days, mainly because everybody has the fresh memories of what happened in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal in all three, some version of the Gen Z protests brought down a government that was in power. In at least one case, it was the government, which is the equivalent of a strongman government, although the government was led by a woman, but strongman is just a metaphor. It is gender neutral metaphor. Sheikh Hasina, but there were differences. One, Sheikh Hasina was deeply unpopular. She had stolen the earlier election, stolen in the sense that she had won her election by banning her main opposition from contesting. That's one. Second, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, Rajpakshes had become deeply unpopular. They had packed the cabinet with the family. Inflation was running really high. And then Rajpakshe came up with a completely nutty idea of using the force of law to turn all of the country's farming organic. That immediately devastated the farm sector. Sri Lanka has a couple of sources of income. One is tourism, the other is farming, mostly horticulture, tea, spices, coffee, little bit coffee, etc., etc. All of that got devastated. In the process, the currency started weakening rapidly, and there was a run on the dollar, and then the country went into a tailspin. That's how the change took place. So in Nepal, for example, in 20 years since the end of monarchy and the institution of democracy, 13 prime ministerships had taken place or come into being in 20 years. It doesn't mean 13 prime ministers, 13 prime ministerships, because very often they were just taking turns. They were fighting with each other. Then they were joining hands, that is Prachanda and Oli, and people just got fed up. People got fed up. Inflation was rampant. Nepal is a heavily remittance dependent economy. Inflation is felt very severely by families that are left behind. And that's what led to political change. Now, in all three countries, the change came through elections. And Nepal and Sri Lanka, the change was virtuous. A free election took place, everybody participated, and new political forces emerged. In Bangladesh, again an election took place, but after 1 year, more than 1 year of a quote-unquote caretaker government under Mohammad Yunus, who took the country into some other direction. And once again, the election that was held was a kind of incomplete election because it was held by keeping the main opposition party out. So basically, they paid the compliment back to Sheikh Hasina. Those three examples I quoted just to tell you that none of those parallels exist in India. In India, there is an elected government which has just been winning state elections. It has now not a majority of its own, but with its coalition partners, a large majority. Parliament is in session. It's a cadre-based ideological party. To get your demands accepted by this government is a big challenge. And that's where CJP has shown a great deal of spine. However, to expect that they will bring down the government is to put an unreasonable ask on their shoulders. In fact, the closest parallel I can find to what's happening right now is the challenge that Mrs. Gandhi faced between, say, 1974, between 1973, 74, 75. That's when India had a triple shock. India had a war economy. India had won the war against Pakistan. Bangladesh was created, but any war costs a lot of money. It was the post-war inflation. Then India got 2 consecutive years of drought, which is rare, but got 2 consecutive years of drought. And then 1973 Yom Kippur War. So everybody got the oil shock. And in India also, inflation reached almost 30%. It was in that period that students, Gen X equivalent of that period, revolted in Gujarat. And what was the spark? Just as neat was the spark. The spark then was the mess fees in students' hostels, because each meal now cost more. And that led to a nationwide movement that spread to Bihar. Jayaprakash Narayan joined in. He made it the Sampurn Kranti or total revolution movement. That also did not bring down the government, but Mrs. Gandhi imposed the emergency. She lost power only after the emergency in a full-fledged election. Now, since that movement was directed also at the chief minister, Chimanbhai Patel, he was called Chimanchor at that point, he was made to resign. Congress party made him resign, but you know what? He came back to power later at the head of his own party, supported by the Congress as well. And he is the one who started building the Narmada Dam and faced the protests against the dam at their peak. In fact, after he had come back to power and he had started building the Narmada Dam and Veda Patkar's campaign was at its peak, at India Today, we had organized a series of discussions called Crossfire, where people who had different views on a key issue came and talked. And that's where both Veda Patkar and Chimman Bhai Patel came and participated in that discussion. See this picture. It is not easy to find pictures from that time because nobody took so many pictures. We didn't have phone cameras. This one you see Chimman Bhai Patel. You also see Arun Puri, my editor, in the same picture. And he had a very successful second innings. So I would say he was probably the only chief minister who was directly driven out because of a protest. There might have been cases where because of a protest or civil unrest, the center imposed president's rule and a chief minister lost their jobs. This happened in Assam for sure. There were other agitations in the past, but most of those were for demands of statehood, starting with the Andhra Pradesh movement in 1951. That's when communists also picked up arms. They wanted a Telugu-speaking state to be taken out of the Madras state. That took some time. In fact, that led to the constitution of the States Reorganization Commission, which in 1956 resulted in the States Reorganization Act and the constitution of linguistic states. And yet, demand for statehood remained a key subject for public protests over the next 5 decades. The Andhra movement also saw the first long fast in India's history, 58 days, and the fasting leader, Poti Sriramulu, died in the course of that fast. And subsequently, we saw agitations, each one of which unfortunately led to some loss of life, for the creation of Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, and Jharkhand out of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Bihar. And later, a movement was resumed for a separate Telangana. In 2001, it started under K. Chandrasekhar Rao. He founded an organization which became a party, Telangana Rashtra Samiti. It, however, found a new energy after the death of Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy, the Chief Minister of United Andhra Pradesh, in 2009. Once he died, the demand for Telangana was back. That is when KCR sat on a fast unto death, and the central government made a commitment for a full-fledged Telangana state. And one of the most powerful and popular and ultimately successful public protests was the anti-Hindi movement in what is now Tamil Nadu, or what subsequently became Tamil Nadu, was Madras state earlier, in the 1960s. That is when the Dravid parties, or more specifically DMK, rose and defeated the Congress party in the 1967 election. Since then, the Congress has never come even close to power by itself. In the same decade, there were competitive agitations, after which Bombay state was divided in a Marathi-speaking Maharashtra and Gujarati-speaking Gujarat. Again, in the following decade, the Punjabi Suba movement took place, where a Punjabi-speaking state was created. So Punjab became a much smaller state with districts going to Himachal Pradesh and Haryana, with districts going to Himachal Pradesh and Haryana. That's also when two Punjab leaders sat on fasts multiple times. There was Sant Fateh Singh, who sat on fast at least 4 times, beginning with 1960. First, he was demanding Punjabi Suba, and after Punjabi Suba, he sat on fast at least 3 times, demanding the inclusion of Chandigarh in Punjab. And then the remarkable person we had spoken about earlier, Darshan Singh Feruman, who first sat on a protest in 1921 demanding autonomy for the Gurdwaras. He now was sitting on fast and finally sat on a long fast, the longest of all, in jail, demanding the inclusion of Chandigarh into Punjab. That was for 74 days. In fact, he died on the 74th day of his fast. A school in Punjab, a Gurdwara, are named after him. He died in 1969. Anyway, let's come back to now. As usually happens, as almost always happens, negotiations are on. I told you this is stage 3 of the CJP protests, and hopefully there will be some kind of a settlement in which both sides will do give and take, and it's possible that both will get up from the table a little bit unhappy but with a sustainable resolution.